So here we go. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dr. Ansel Johnson, and I am the CEO and founder of Healthy Living with a Vision Foundation. And I am so excited to have our third in our series on low vision, or when your glasses no longer work. And we're going to take a little bit of different spin. But first of all, I do want to um, say a little bit about our foundation. Healthy Living with a Vision Foundation was founded in June 19th of 2020. That's right, we were founded in the COVID situation. And our mission is to eliminate healthcare disparities in communities of color. Low vision, or people with reduced vision or functional vision, is one of those initiatives that falls under the radar for a lot of people. And we are here to really educate people, enlighten them. And this session we have is very, very special because it's more of an advocacy special. In the past, our prior two sessions, we had low vision specialists and doctors, and we're going to have one on today. Dr. Tracy Williams is going to call in, and he is a low vision specialist who has worked with some of our Chicago's top sports teams in terms of Chicago White Sox and Chicago Bears, I believe. We have Janet Lebreck, who worked for the Barack Obama, under the Barack Obama administration, who's one of our country's strongest advocates in the area of low vision and disabilities, people living with disabilities. So I am really excited. And our special super guest is Rich Kane. Those of us from Chicago area remember him as an announcer for the Chicago White Sox. And he still does a little bit of that in spring training as a in the preseason. But I'll talk a little bit more about Rich King. We are so happy to have him on today. And our guest speaker who's calling in is Dr. Tracy Williams, because one of the things we're going to do today is talk about, Rich King's going to talk about living with someone that is visually impaired, and his wife was living with a condition called Usher Syndrome. So we have Dr. Tracy Williams on the line, and he can tell us a little bit about Usher Syndrome. And before I turn it totally over to Tracy, I want to encourage everyone to look on our website, healthylivingwithavision.org. Please donate. We can only keep these up with public donations. We have no sponsors for this program. Everyone on this panel is volunteering and giving their own time to educate the public and to enlighten those of us. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce Dr. Tracy Williams.
Well, hi, everyone. This is Tracy Williams. And gosh, what a pleasure it is to hook up with that legendary announcer on WGN and with the White Sox, Rich King. And boy, so many great years with Rich King. We would be in spring training together. But tonight, I'd like to talk about Usher Syndrome, because his dear late wife, Maggie King, was someone who met the challenge of having Usher Syndrome, a very special person that I've met in my career as a low vision specialist. And I'll just start off saying that Usher Syndrome is probably the most common problem where both sight and hearing is lost. And it depends on what level, but there are three types of Usher syndrome, type 1, type 2, and type 3, depending on the severity. So a person is actually born with Usher syndrome. It's a genetic problem. But as the severity, depending on the severity, sometimes the child is born with deafness and vision loss. And then sometimes it doesn't happen until they're a teenager and sometimes later in life. This was studied. I think it was first recognized, I want to say about 1858, but I think there was a Scottish ophthalmologist about 1914 that actually documented about 60 cases or so. So when you have that definitive diagnosis of Usher syndrome, I think for the individual that gets that diagnosis, and certainly for the parents, this is really a very, very hard diagnosis to swallow. But I would tell you that there is hope supported by science. There's no cure for Usher syndrome right now. There's a lot of science going on, but I think the till then is to be able to get the absolute best low vision rehabilitation, training and services that you can get, because the person should never be defined by a vision and hearing loss, but by their head and heart. And I'll just share with you, there are professionals who are trained to work in co-management with the medical team. So quite often from an eye standpoint, it'll be a retinal specialist that's involved, because Usher syndrome from a retinal standpoint involves the photoreceptors. And the two most common signs would be poor night vision and poor side vision. And a dilated eye examination can recognize a retina that has signs of this type of vision loss known as retinitis pigmentosa. I'll tell you, it kind of looks like, when you look at this retina, like someone took a paintbrush and dipped it in some black paint and just flicked it around the periphery. But that's what it looks like. And again, when a person has this, they want to first of all find out, how can I maximize all the vision I do have? So let's not just, look at what I don't have. Let's look at the resources of vision that I do have, and let's see how we can maximize that. And then it goes the same way with hearing. I mean, sometimes it'll involve a cochlear implant, special high-tech hearing aids. People learn to do sign language, and they get good at lip reading. I'll just say that there's skills to be learned so the person can live their life, not have life live them. So Maggie King was a person that, oh my gosh, she was like a master carpenter. She had all the tools. It took her a while to learn what tools did she need to match up with her activities of daily living, but she attained them. And then she was driven. She acquired the best possible skills she could. And she went on. She went on in school and her career. And I think every day that she was alive was a great day for her. So I probably should take a breath here, Dr. Ansel. And
Okay.
if somebody wants to ask me a question, or
Sure.
if there's anything I've missed.
Sure, we can, anyone that's on can leave a question in the chat box. But one of the things you just mentioned, that usually Usher syndrome, is that usually diagnosed as a child, or can that be more of an adult onset?
Well,
so kind of describe the course
type
and the history of the disease.
and what the severity is. But people are born with this, and when it manifests itself is how then, which classification, the more severe, and usually you see it hand in hand, severe vision loss with a severe hearing loss, or maybe a more mild profile. So sometimes it's very apparent, at a very young age, birth to 3, and sometimes it doesn't manifest itself until a person is a teenager or older. And then again, sometimes it just shows up later in life. So.
All right. Great. Thank you so very much. I want to take the time also to introduce more fully um, Janet Lebreck, who is again our strongest advocate and knows Rich King and has brought Tracy Williams on board with these seminars. And just to remind everyone, she has had tremendous national impact uh, in terms of policies, 28-year career with the Massachusetts Commission for the Blind. And she has an honorary doctorate degree actually from the New England College of Optometry, where I went to school for my training, and really setting the bar very high in terms of what we should be thinking and doing for people with disabilities. So Janet, as someone who walks that walk every day, I want to give you an opportunity to say a few words before I introduce Rich King.
Sure, thank you so much. And I just want to echo what Dr. Williams said also about Usher syndrome and about any type of disability in general, that the condition itself in no way should define who the individual person is. And I think that when you hear from Richard, you will hear from his story. And when you hear about Maggie, you will feel like you've known Maggie all your life, and you certainly will walk away understanding, the impact that she had on others, but also from a rehabilitation perspective, that it's really important to note that some of the skill sets that are important to acquire, as Dr. Williams indicated, can happen as part of the rehabilitation process. The earlier, the better. The sooner an individual can get the support, can get the assistive technology tools that they need, certainly the mentoring and access, to other peer groups that who may have Usher syndrome. It really does help to support the family, because I never look at that it just impacts one person, impact on the whole family. Anyone who knows an individual like Maggie is going to be impacted by the condition itself. There's a lot to learn. There's the opportunity there to also, understand better how to support the individual as part of the rehabilitation process. So I'm so happy that Richard is here this evening also to share his story.
Janet, thank you so very much. And one of the things I want to kind of plug is that there are lots of pieces of technology that are out there that can help people. And as an optometrist myself with a disease and general practice orientation, one thing that I was finding, and I'm a converter, we were not really doing enough referrals to low vision specialists. A lot of times, and we are all as optometrists and ophthalmologists are kind of guilty of that, when we can no longer with glasses or with surgery improve the day-to-day vision of someone, and they're going to have this impairment. And now I'm just super fired up about this series because we are making those referrals and there is hope and people can live fully functional lives. Usher syndrome, again, as you heard from Dr. Williams, involves loss of sight and hearing. So, but every patient, everybody's an individual. So all of these things don't affect everyone the same way. So we have to remember that in our healthcare. And Dr. Williams, do you have anything else to add before I introduce our superstar?
Let me just say this too, that a person that has any type of vision loss, or in this case, as Maggie had a dual sensory loss, boy, how blessed you are to have a partner in life that is understanding and is willing to come along with that type of journey. I believe that Rich actually met Maggie when they were in grade school. So enough said. I know that Maggie just loved Rich and Rich just loved Maggie, and they were a great team. And take it from there, Rich.
All right. Well, real briefly about Rich King, thank you very much, Dr. Williams. Really appreciate you being on. I know you're in transit now, but you are ingrained in this series when your glasses no longer work. So we look forward to having you in our next seminar. That'll be in January, but we'll talk about that later. All right, so
Yeah,
Rich
and
King.
I'm going to try to hang on as long as I can because Rich is just such a great speaker. So thanks again.
Okay, sure. Thank you again. And Rich King, man, he's a Chicago broadcasting legend. I'm Chicago South Side, South Suburb person myself, a Sox fan. But he's the author of 2 books, which he's going to talk about. And he's a former radio and TV broadcaster. He retired from WGN-TV in 2016 after almost 5 decades in the Windy City. And he began his career as a news writer, producer, and news manager at CBS in Chicago from 1968 to 77. And then he made a switch to sportscasting. He anchored and reported on sports for WBBM Radio, the CBS station in Chicago. He did both pre and post game coverage for the Chicago Bears. And we were just talking about that a little bit before we came on and broadcast. And he also did play-by-play and color for the Chicago White Sox for a couple of years. He was named Sportscaster of the Year in Illinois in 1998. And that same year, he became a full-time sportscaster in TV for the CBS Channel 2, later joining WGN-TV as a sports anchor and reporter until his retirement in 1990. He was given a Silver Circle Award in recognition for his accomplishments and careers in TV and radio. Now, what we're going to get into is Rich has 2 books out. And the first that relate to what we're talking about, his first book was called My Maggie. And it was a loving account of his life of his childhood sweetheart and wife for 32 years. Now, Maggie passed away in 2002 after a lengthy battle against cancer. And then she was diagnosed early in life with the rare disease that we were talking about, Usher Syndrome, that was slowly taking away her ability to see and hear. And then she lived her life with courage and eventually gained a college degree to become the chief volunteer coordinator for the Chicago Lighthouse for the Blind. Now, Rich has a second book, Back in the Game. And obviously he's back in the game right now, which details his recovery from the depression after the love of his life, Maggie, passed away, and the inspiration he received from his second wife, April. So we are so blessed to have you on, Rich, and just, man, we just want to let you go and talk about your story. And I'm inspired just reading your bio, man. So you take it away, Rich King.
Well, it's hard to live up to Tracy Williams' buildup there. It's all downhill from here. I'd say that, Doctor.
That's okay.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here. Janet's a very good friend of mine. She is one of the forces in helping sight impaired people and blind people. Known her for many, many years. Her husband, Russ, they're at my wedding with April. So that's a great relationship. Tracy Williams, I've known for so long. Great guy. And one of the best in his field. And I love them dearly, all of them. But the story is about Maggie. It's not about me. It's not about anything I did in my career. It's about Maggie. And the most people ask me after 48 years, what's the most important thing that happened to me in my career? It was writing My Maggie, because My Maggie, that book helped a lot of people. Her life inspired not only sight impaired people, but also people in wheelchairs, all kinds of disabled people. I got thousands of letters and emails at WGN when I was on the air promoting the book, and saying that Maggie's story was inspirational, that it helped them. And she was the most courageous person I ever met. And she had all the cards stacked against her. She had this horrible hammer over her head. It's like a guillotine. You're going to go blind someday and deaf. She had 3 different cancers. She fought through 2 of them. She got through the melanoma and the breast cancer. The ovarian cancer finally claimed her 19 years ago. But she was such a force. She graduated from college when she had Usher syndrome. She went to Loyola and Magnum Cum Laude. She was at the top of her class. And she got a job at Lighthouse for the Blind in Chicago, actually counseling people. When they had a person come in and needed inspiration, needed help, Maggie was the person they talked to. So she was such a great force. And the thing about, I think, and Dr. Williams mentioned this, and I think it's worth mentioning, it is not a death sentence when you have are diagnosed with something like that. Yes, she was depressed. Yes, she went into about a month or two long depression, no question about it. But she came out of it, and she was stronger than ever. The cancers too, depression. Yeah, of course, there's a setback, but she fought out of it. She was the most determined woman, the most courageous woman I've ever met. And if you ask me today, and this is for people who are beset with any kind of disability, if you ask me for the happiest person I ever met in my life, it was Maggie. She had a wonderful, happy life, 53 years. And she told me at the end, I got everything I could out of this life, and she did. And I think that's what people should realize. She never gave up. She fell down. She fell off train platforms. She knocked herself on the walls. She had bruises on her body, but she fought through it all. And we had a tremendous life together. And I think her life can serve. That's why I wrote the book. And it worked. We sold 20,000 copies of My Maggie. I was on Today's Show. I was on Lester Holt. I was on in Los Angeles with people. So Bonnie Hunt. So it still inspires me today. And Maggie's with me all the time, because every time I get down on myself, I say, you know what? Maggie would say, get off your butt. That's what she would do. Yeah. And she was a wonderful person.
No, thank you very much for that. I think we're about inspiration. As I said, the Healthy Living with a Foundation, we're about eliminating healthcare disparities in communities of color. And so many times we need those stories of inspiration in our communities, because we don't have a lot of them in some cases. And so we really want to be the funnel to show people that, hey, don't get down because you have diabetes, or you've had an amputation, or you've lost your sight. There are people that have overcome so much more with so little. And so we appreciate that story. So tell me about, because we talked about how this Usher syndrome is usually diagnosed in childhood. So tell me about, since you and Maggie grew up together, how you supported each other, knowing that, some people would say, oh, as you said, you're going to go blind, you're going to lose your hearing. With that kind of knowledge, how did you all support each other?
Well, it's a great story, Doctor, because I met Maggie in second grade. We went to school together at St. Procopius, near west side of Chicago. And I dated her. I got to college for 5 years, and I married her in 1970. And as a child, she had hearing aids. And her mother used to tell me that the doctors told her it was nerve damage, and that would be it. It wouldn't get any worse. However, we didn't know this till later on. When she was a child, she had very little peripheral vision. As Dr. Tracy Williams mentioned, at the end, what it does is your vision over the years shrinks to you're looking out of a dime or a quarter, whatever severity is. Mm-hmm. So at the end of her life, she was looking out of a quarter in the tunnel. But growing up with her, she was fine. I mean, she got around the old neighborhood good. She knew the neighborhood, even though she couldn't see at night. However, when she went to college at Eastern Illinois, they took her to a party, and she could come home on her own. She couldn't get home, so she knew then she had an issue. She told me before we got married, she said, I got an issue with my eyes, and I said, but that doesn't bother me at all. I said, so I loved her so much it didn't matter at that point what was going on. But over the years, what happened is when she was in her early 20s, life was pretty. If she was reading books, she was fine. However, every year it got worse. Every year, slowly, it's a slow process. It takes 10, 15 years to develop. But we kept going in, and the doctor said, well, it's nerve damage and this and that. Finally, she got diagnosed with Usher's. And that was a horrible thing to be diagnosed with, obviously. And she went into depression with that, but she came out of it. And it kept getting worse every year. It kept, she had less sight. The key for her, and I'll tell you this may be educational for people. Most people don't want to have a cane. I mean, nobody does. Obviously, you want to get by and walk on your own. She fought it for a few years. She said, I want to get a cane. I said, well, you know what? You may need a cane. Finally, she went to a guy in Chicago, Don Davia, was with an agency that helped disabled people, and he was blind. And he just told her, look, you got to get a cane. You know, it'll part the ocean for you. You'll have a whole different life. And sure enough, when she got that cane, her whole life changed. She went everywhere with that cane. She learned how to use it. She got, Dr. Williams mentioned, she got all kinds of different gadgets, you know, larger clocks with bigger numbers on them, sunglasses, all kinds of different things that are available to people with low vision. And she thrived on it. At the end, she had a computer with all kinds of gadgets on it for her to enlarge the print. So her life was pretty, in that way, with technology really helped her a lot. So near the end of her life, she didn't have much sight or hearing. Her hearing was worse actually than her sight. But she had the big hearing aids, and then they have a system where you can talk into a microphone and it helps you hear. So all these things she had that helped her. But that's your question. You get through it with love. It's as simple as that. You love the person, you're going to get through it. The divorce rate is very high in that area. When people are diagnosed with some kind of disability, people bail out. But you know what? I knew back then, and I was a young man. I said, I love this woman so much. I took the thought of leaving her never entered my mind. I loved her so much. So it was a moot question. Whatever happened to her, I'd be with her. And if you truly love a person, which we did, we had a bond that was so strong, you're never going to leave. And I never even thought about leaving. So if you're in a personal life, and the rewards you get in your own personal life from helping her through life, and she did all the work. I just helped her. But even I feel good about that because I was still around. I got her things. I was able to. I used to yell at her, and you know, she'd be walking toward the wall at home, and I say, "Stop!" You know, and she was. So the little things like that I did. I feel good about. And I think if you at the end of your life, when you know, are in your final throes, you look back and say, you know, I'm glad that I didn't bail out. And I think people who are thinking of that, or you know, I can't deal with this. Think about that again. And the rewards you'll get later on will be great.
No, thank you for that. I think the big takeaway I have for that is love conquers all. It's a cliche. Sometimes, you know, we don't think about that. We all have our other agendas, but love, true love, can conquer all, and that's what it's about. And from a practitioner standpoint, I feel like you need to treat your patients and treat each other just like you'd want to be treated. You want to give everybody, you know, how you'd want to be treated. Now, you also mentioned I noticed Dr. Williams is on the line here still. Some of the little devices that can help you. People don't realize it's not always high tech, but there's low tech things that can actually help people in their day-to-day living. You mentioned just the cane. It really opened up her whole world.
Right.
So, Dr. Williams, can you talk a little bit about a few things? I know there's a lot of stuff on there.
You betcha. Boy, am I glad I'm still on. Boy, Rich, that was just so inspirational.
Yeah.
I would first of all say that when you are thinking about getting help, whether it's low tech or high tech, you take an inventory of what your activities of daily living are. And you say, okay, like I woke up this morning and believe it or not, I did personal grooming. And then I walked my 3 dogs. And then I looked at my mail and the paper. And then I had breakfast. And then I was looking at the TV. And on the day goes. And then you say to yourself, can I get that vision from my eyes? Or do I need to get that vision from my ears or fingertips? And then you need to think about, is it in the distance? Is it arm's length or near? So by doing that, there's going to be some tools that can still help the eyes. Like, for example, there could be magnification and stronger lenses for up close or prescription magnifiers. Maybe it's special glasses for distance that have telescopes in them to amplify the distant vision, because a telescope can be like a hearing aid for the retina. And then sometimes you need different colored filters to give you contrast, but try to eliminate glare and not having big spikes of bright to dark. And I think too, you have to look at the rehabilitation team. You have rehabilitation teachers like Janet was talking about, occupational therapists. You have people that are good at access technology. Oh my gosh, how about scanners now? where your reading speed could be even faster. But you have to assess with a dual sensory loss, what do I have? You know, what can I use with hearing, sight, or tactile? And what you said, what Rick said about that wonderful Department of Human Services counselor, Don Davia, who was blind from the age of about 22 or 3, who had retinitis pigmentosa. But I'm going to tell you what, he didn't miss a beat, like Rich was saying. And having the opportunity to have safe travel technique, canes, and there's other things. There's so much where you don't have to be using your energy to fill the buckets of anger and depression, but only fruitfulness. So that's just a quick vignette of it, but just there's so much that can be learned.
Oh,
I think, Ansel, I would add to that also that, you know, in spite of the technology, whether it's low tech or it's high tech, I think it's also important to remember that there's a learning curve with all of this technology, and for everyone else, it's different from somebody else. You know, some people have a high tolerance. I happen to be one that can be very patient and just keep trying things until I get it, you know, and then I become proficient at it. But others, you know, may have less of a tolerance level, you know, for that kind of repetitiveness and trying. But the bottom line is that I think that the reward, as we said earlier, at the end of that process is absolutely amazing, because it's what keeps you independent. It's what teaches you also where your tolerance level is, what you can actually tolerate, what you can learn. That the human brain is absolutely amazing. You know, our senses that we lose, you know, really help us to challenge the rest of the parts of our brain, you know, to be thinking differently and having patience and understanding that there is that learning curve, not only for the person using the technology, but for the people they live with. You know, that it's important for them to be patient also, but also equally important for them to learn throughout the process as well about the technology and ways that they can possibly support their loved one in using the technology and learning about it as well.
No, thank you for that, because I was just about to flip it over to you as someone that is living day to day with visual impairment, but has achieved some of the highest levels of success in the private sector and in the government. So thank you very much for that, Janet. And Rich, I'm going to turn it back over to you, because you not only have one book, but your second book, Back in the Game. And we just talked about, you know, the love that really persevered to allow you to, and Maggie, because I asked how you all supported each other, and you gave a really great answer to that. But with any loss, there's still a depression, and sure, it's after the effects when you lose someone that you've been so close with. So can you talk a little bit about your second book, Back in the Game?
Well, it's a very simple story. I mean, I forgot the lesson that Maggie taught me. I went into depression after she died, because she was my whole life. I mean, she was everything to me. And I, for about 4, 5, 6 years, and I was okay. I was functioning. I was working. Depression is a weird thing, because on the outside, you function, you talk to people, and you're fine, you're working. But when you're at home at night, and especially in the morning, you get up, it's just a lousy feeling. You feel that you don't understand how people can be happy. And that's the definition. It's losing hope. You lose hope. And that's a bad place to be. I don't want to ever go back there. But I met April about 6 years after Maggie died, and she got me out of it. I learned to love again, and she, between April and between my own recognizing what I had to get going, it worked. So I got out of it, and it was a wonderful feeling to get out of it. But depression is a tricky thing, because it kind of grabs you where you don't understand totally what's happening to you. And when Maggie died, you know, Maggie told me many a time, she says, you better enjoy your life. You better live your life. I don't want to see you moping around. I want to see you doing this, doing that. You better make your life worthwhile. Now, what helped me immensely in that 6-year period, of course, was writing of the book. I wrote the book, My Maggie, 2 years after she died. And that book was interesting to write because the first 5 or 6 chapters was reliving the beauty of our life. The final 3 chapters was about her getting sick and dying, which was the hardest part to write. But that book actually, I wrote it for a year and then went on speaking to her for a year. So that kind of kept her alive in a way. But you can't, she's gone. You can't keep her alive. So you have to move on with your life and find somebody. Maggie always told me, when she was very young, we used to talk about death and everything. And she said, I said, if you die, I'm never going to get married again. And she says, you're making a mistake. Every love is different. My love with you is special, but you can find somebody else who's special too, in a different way. So don't give up on life. And I see, as I gotten older now, I see so many people giving up on life, and you never lose hope. You got to have hope. And sometimes it's a fight to keep it. But the second book was called Back in the Game. And that's about my recovery from Maggie's death. And I hope to help people who were in that situation. A lot of baby boomers were losing their wives and husbands. So I thought maybe I could do some good. And so that was the reason I wrote that book. Between the 2 books, so it was a lot of writing. I got one more coming up, and that'll be the last one.
Well, you made a living off of your mouth.
I did.
So why not work another part of your body, right?
That's right. That's right.
But no, that's great. That's very helpful. So that helps me chime into another aspect. And Janet, you can chime in on this because it's not all, and Dr. Williams, because he's still on the line, hanging in there. Thank you. That a lot of times when we lose something as valuable as our sight or an organ or anything like that, and any serious thing, there's a whole depression aspect to deal with. And Janet, in terms of your sight loss, I mean, tell us about how you've kind of dealt with the mental roller coaster.
Well, I think that Rich did a great job sharing what that depression can be like for people. And I guess I would start by saying, first of all, that it's very normal, that adjusting to any type of disability, adjusting to someone passing away that you love very much, going through that, it is a process, and having a disability and having a diagnosis, particularly if it's at a young age, you experience those periods of adjustment, throughout the process of the disability. The hardest part, I think, about a condition like Usher Syndrome or Retinitis Pigmentosa is that it is very slow and it is very progressive. So on a day-to-day basis, if you're going through your life, you don't necessarily always stop to think about the fact that you're experiencing this loss, because sometimes that progression is so slow, you don't necessarily notice it. What you do notice is that sometimes, well, wait a minute, I was able to read that before, or geez, I tripped over a curb and I would have seen that before. And so unless you're paying attention to those signals, then you start to feel that kind of slow descent, into depression. I think what is helpful is to, first of all, recognize it. Secondly, to reach out for support, particularly from peers, who may have the same condition. But also, thirdly, I think that to recognize that it is a process, and that, disability oftentimes is compared to the grieving process because you go through various stages. I was very fortunate also in that I have, multiple siblings, but also I was also embedded in the community as a young person at Perkins School for the Blind. And so our schedules were very busy. We were very active, but also we were normalized because we were with other kids who were blind. And so we didn't know anything different. When I was back in my community, I did. I'm sorry, it's my assistive technology. When I was back in my community, I felt very isolated because I was not connected in the way that I wanted to be connected, in the community. And so sometimes the perception of others can have an impact on you as well, which is why I say it's important to find people within your community, people within your peer group also who can help with that as well. But it is very much a normal process. And, the sooner you get support around that, the easier it is to go through it as well.
Right. I just want to pause right here and say we are now streaming live on Facebook. My name is Dr. Ansel Johnson, President and CEO of Healthy Living with a Vision Foundation. And you are watching When Your Glasses No Longer Work. And this is our advocacy show when people have lost their vision and how do we deal with it? And we have two very strong advocates, Janet Lebreck, who has worked in government at the very highest level, being an advocate for people living with disabilities, and Rich King, who is a Chicago sportscasting legend, telling the story about his love of his life, Maggie, his 2 books, and his recovery, and the love story that he had, and really the message of hope. And we also have Dr. Tracy Williams, who is a Chicago area low vision specialist, who is giving some great advice. And with that, Dr. Williams, I'm so happy you're still on the line, hanging in there. And can you tell us as a clinician how you're able to help some of your patients that might be dealing with depression and breaking the news that, their glasses or regular glasses will no longer work like they thought they would?
Well, the first thing is, I think that the low vision experience is not a short one. I would say, I'm usually with a patient an hour, whether they like it or not. No, but we work on the head, the heart, and the eye. So absolutely, the head part is what we call professional paternalism. So hopefully you're a professional and paternalistically teach the person as much as they want to learn so they can take ownership of what the challenge is. I think when you're not consumer driven and you don't share that knowledge, it really makes it harder for people to be the best that they can be. And the inspirational part that both Janet and Rich have talked about, absolutely, it does help sometimes when you're in a support group and or you've met some friends who are on the same journey. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. They can share some of their experiences and challenges. But I think that people have to know that they can be better. And sometimes the best thing that I do is maybe see potential in them when no one else can. And it's not that hard for the low vision doctor, not just because of the training they have, but with me, all the years of people that I've met, like Maggie King, that have achieved. So I think absolutely you must belong to the Little Locomotive Club. And we all know what the Little Locomotive said, right? I think I can. So tools will end up in the top desk drawer, I think, unless you have a purpose, you understand how to use them, but you've got wind in your sail to live your life. I unfortunately have got to go, Dr. Ansel. I'm sorry, but I am so glad that I stayed on to listen to my good friend Rich King. And Rich, thank you for sharing all those fantastic insights. And it's always good to have Dr. Janet Lebreck on board because she's one of my heroes as well. And yes. Oh my God, Dr. Ansel, you're like the Johnny Carson of these shows. So very good being with you too. So I wish you all a great night. Sorry, I've got to bail out. You're not going to believe this, Rich, but I'm at my 50th high school reunion. Oh. You might say, how could that be, Tracy? Well, I was a prodigy in high school when I was 5 years old, right, Rich? Wait a minute, my nose is starting to grow here. But the bottom line is great being with you all. And any way I can help anyone out there as well. I'm at the Spectrius Institute in Wheaton, Illinois. I'm also on staff at the Loyola Department of Ophthalmology. And feel free to look me up if I can be helpful.
No, thank you very much. And you be blessed. And we are just so fortunate to have you on as long as you have, but to have you as part of this. And we will talk again in January at our next session, okay?
Absolutely. And go Lebreck Warriors.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank
thank
you,
you.
doctor.
And
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Tracy Williams is, obviously we're close friends, but he helped Maggie so much, and a lot of the doctors she dealt with helped him. I think he nailed it though, but the support thing. And he had a very interesting comment too, which I lived through. You know, when Maggie was diagnosed and she became in the blind community, deaf blind community, low vision, she was happy in that community because that was her group. And of course, my group, my life was with the people who could see and hear. There comes a point where you have to give that up. If you're with a person who's beset with that horrible situation, she was happy in that life. So I had to give that up. I had to give that to her. And the book I wrote, My Maggie, to me, the most poignant page in that book, Maggie had to go to New York to be an internship for the Helen Keller thing. It was a big thing for her. She loved going. And she said, well, I'll go. I said, I'll go with you. She said, no, you won't. I'm going myself. She had a cane. She adjusted the cane. She was fine. To see her go on that plane by herself was a hardship for me. I had to give it up because I wanted to go with her so bad. I was worried about getting off the plane in New York. You know what New York is, it's hustle and bustle. But she made it, but that was the best thing it could have done. That was like a liberation for her. She got through it. She went to New York. She got to the Helen Keller Association. She was fine. But you have to have the courage to let them do that, or else if I'd have went with her, it wouldn't have been the same. So I think Dr. Williams, that was his point, and that's true. You have to be, you have to have that gives them a freedom, and Maggie got that freedom by going to New York.
no, thank you. And that's a tremendous story in itself, because in my day-to-day, just seeing patients, we may have someone coming in a wheelchair or a walker, and I'll look to help them get out the chair, and they're like, no, I can do it myself.
Yep.
And so we have to sometimes let go. And sometimes those little things that we just try to do stuff for people, people like having some sense of control over their lives and independence. And sometimes we forget about that. And that spreads beyond losing your sight, be losing your limb, or muscle function, things of that nature. So we have to look for ways to empower people, as Dr. Williams was saying, your daily living functions. Right. Activities of daily living is the terminology. And that's again, I can't tell you how that's so inspirational. And you have
no more inspiration than Janet Lebreck herself, who has achieved so much in this life and this in her successful career, that she's a heroic in her own right too. So there's a lot of people that overcome the depression, overcome the shock of going blind, and it's courageous to see. It's wonderful to see.
Yeah. And speaking of that, Janet, can you share us any stories in which maybe kind of get on your nerve a little bit when people are trying to help you when you didn't really want to be helped because you were doing okay?
Yeah, I have a great story, actually. And this was actually during my working career in Massachusetts, and I had gotten my very first seeing eye dog, German Shepherd, and I was going down Main Street in Massachusetts, and it was raining, and I had approached a curb, and there was an intersection, and it was really raining hard, and I could tell that my dog was hesitating, but I wasn't sure why, because I couldn't really see, why he was hesitating. But I figured that we were at a corner, it's pouring. My dog did not like walking in puddles, so I assumed that it was probably a pretty good sized puddle there. So I gave him the command to go right so that we could actually navigate around the puddle. And just as I did that, someone approached me and says, oh no, don't go that way. And I was confused because I thought, well, okay, so there must be something else wrong. Then if I can't go to the right, then maybe I can go to the left. But he wasn't actually explaining why I couldn't go to the right. And before I could ask the question, he approached me and he physically picked me up on the corner of the street. He physically lifted me, and it was apparently a traffic police officer. He physically picked me up. I'm yelling at him, put me down. And my dog is going crazy. My dog is like trying to get at him. And he says, does that dog bite? And I said, I don't know. I've only had him for 2 weeks, and I really wasn't sure that the dog wouldn't bite him, but I was absolutely furious, because, he gave me no indication that he was going to actually physically approach me. His thought was, I'm going to help get you across this puddle. And the way I'm going to do it is I'm going to carry you across it, as if he were carrying me across the bridal threshold. And I was just so distraught after that. And just so discouraged. I just had never thought that it was possible that someone would just physically do that to you. And so it took me a while, to get over that. I was very cautious after that incident, and it took me a while to rebuild my confidence. And certainly I took that as a learning opportunity also to contact the local police department and say, look, we need to have a discussion here. You guys need some training. So I took it as an opportunity to also provide some training for them as well. And so it's one of those things, again, that you just never approach someone or put your hands on someone. You can offer for assistance, and if the person says yes, that's great. If they say no, don't be personally offended by it. It usually just means that they're okay. They may have difficulty navigating, but they'll figure it out, unless you see that there's something that really is going to cause harm to that person, that they're going to get injured. And then you can just let them know that. Let them have the choice to make that decision about whether or not they want that assistance.
And Jen, isn't there a way, also there's a special way, you can't just grab a person around the waist or the neck or whatever and got him across. Tell people how that's done.
Absolutely. The sighted guide technique is intended for the blind person to take the elbow. When you hold your elbow in a crook right, is as if you were wearing a sling, and the blind person holds onto your elbow, and you're always at front of the positioning and walking, so that the blind person is sort of about a half a step behind you. But that helps the blind person to be able to really trail you. It's a respectful position. Never pick someone up sweep them off their feet, literally. So I can laugh about it today, but I can tell you that I was not laughing that day. So
that's the truth. Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Maggie had a lot of people try to help her the wrong way, grab her around the waist or her neck, or
yeah,
the wrong hand. You offer the arm. I learned that early. I learned it in the early going. But there's a way to do it. You just can't assume that that they understand what you're doing. And she also, Maggie had a technique. She memorized streets down in Chicago, so she knew exactly where she was when she was going. She had all these different ways to get around it. And my mother used to go with her, and she said, I got lost, and Maggie knew exactly where she was. She memorized all the streets. So there's a lot of ways you can have success without sight, and Maggie certainly learned how to do that.
It's interesting, when I've traveled, I often, if I need to know what a street is or where a street is that I haven't been on before, I'm always amazed at how many people can't tell you, where it is. They may be from that city and they can't tell you. They can get themselves from point A to point B, but they don't have a route system in their mind, that they can actually reverbalize and transmit that to you in a way that makes sense. They just can't do it. It's amazing. And fortunately today too, for those of us who do a lot of traveling, we have GPS systems now that individuals who are blind or low vision can use, and other types of technology as well, both for walking and for navigating. There's wayfinding beacons now that individuals who are blind and visually impaired can use when they're traveling in airports. There's companies now that are using those beacons, and you use your cell phone in order to find where those beacons are and to put in coordinates or destinations that you want to, access. So there's lots of tools, today to really help with increasing the independence as well.
No, thank you. Those are really some really good specific tools. And you're right, there are a lot of things in our own cell phones, those little computers we carry around and make calls on and text on, that has really helped a lot of people that might not have been at that level 10, 15 years ago.
Mhm.
And but Rich, you and Maggie seem to do well without a cell phone or a smartphone back then. So
No, Maggie, Maggie did a lot of, I'll tell you what, and Janet is a good example of this too. People, if you live with a blind person, you realize how courageous they are. You really do, because she fell off. She went to Union Station one time, the train station in Chicago, and was walking with, she had her cane. She fell off the train, off the platform. Now, it was a drop of about 7 feet. She didn't know if it was 7 feet or 70 feet. She landed on her back. She broke her tailbone. She came home, and she was shook up. Obviously, I won't sugarcoat that. But I gave her a cup of tea. We had a good talk. The next morning, she got up. She said, "I'm going back out. I'm going to go back to the train station." She didn't let her stop her. And it takes a tremendous amount of courage to do that. And when you realize what that is, it makes your life, you can't feel sorry for yourself much, I think people should realize that if you've been set with that kind of ailment, that kind of situation, you realize the courage they have. Whatever I went through, and whatever bad day I have a bad day at work, and I'd come home, I'd feel great because Maggie was there. And that, I think that sums it up. These people have a tremendous amount of courage to overcome this. And really, Maggie once told me, there's only 2 ways to go. You can go in a hole and sulk and ruin the rest of your life, or you can get up off your butt and you can try to do something with your life. It's what you did.
wow. Tremendous. Thank you all. And we are approaching actually the end of our allotment time at 60 minutes. Are any closing remarks? If there's anyone else who wants to put a question in the chat box, do that. But real quick, 30-second Janet, and then we'll go to Rich.
Yeah, I would first say thank you so much, Richard, for sharing your journey with us. Thank you also for sharing the journey of Maggie, also both personally, professionally, but also her legacy is now in her book. As an adjunct professor, I used my Maggie, as you well know. I invited Richard to come out, to my class, and my graduate students who are still in touch with me today, Rich, still remember your visit and often ask about you and how you're doing. And so I think that something like that, the impact, something that we often think of adversity. And when I do my national presentations, I have a saying that says, sometimes in life, adversity and barriers can become a pathway to opportunity. And I think that's what I live by, but I also think it's Maggie's spirit, lives, I think, within all of us, and that she definitely was an inspiration to us and to me personally, as well as to the disability community. I never got to meet Maggie personally, but I feel like I know Maggie, and I want to thank you so much for sharing Maggie with us.
Well, Janet, thanks you. You, of course, are inspiration to me, have been for many, many years. Adversity, right? Adversity, I put this in the book. There's one of 2 things: it either breaks you apart or it solidifies you to a point that you are soulmates. And Maggie and I were. People ask me, "What was Maggie like?" Look at me. We were one person, Maggie, and we shared alike. I can still I know what she says to this day. I can tell you, it's been 19 years, and I know what she said to everything that happens in my life, because she has such a strong force, such a great common sense about life, and she was so courageous. So I thank everybody who participated, Dr. Tracy Williams and everybody in the show, and it's great being with you. Anything you need in the future, just call me, I'll be available.
Well, thank you so very much. You both have, and Dr. Williams, have really blessed us and our audience today. And Janet, your story in terms of being picked up, you turned lemons into lemonade by creating a training program for police officers. So And, that just shows that the power of the human spirit, regardless of what your physical capabilities are, and maximizing that. And I want to remind everyone, this program is brought to you by Healthy Living with a Vision Foundation, a 501c3 organization. So please go on our website, healthylivingwithavision.org, and feel free to donate on our website to keep these programs going. We've done them on COVID-19. We've done them on, this is our third in a series on when your glasses no longer work. We are aligned with Illinois Kidney Alliance. We are big advocates of organ donations, and there is on our site now, we have a big push for organ donation from one of our own board members for kidney transplant. So get tested for that. We have an initiative coming up on diabetes, and our next program will be in January. And so stay tuned on our website, Facebook site, and see our next broadcast. So as always, I tell everyone, be well, see well, and be blessed.
The host has stopped broadcasting the meeting on Facebook.